Welcome to Connect to Joy. Your host, DeChaine, is an intuitive spiritual guide for practical matters and marconic multidimensional energy practitioner. Her quest is to help you realize new possibilities, discover and release what holds you back, and enable you to manifest an inspired life filled with joy. Join us on this journey of transformation. Now, here's your host, DeChaine.
Welcome, beautiful spirits. Today we're going to be talking about inner peace with my guest, Bohdi Sanders. There's a lot going on in the world. You don't even have to look very hard to find something to worry about or have fear over, and those things can totally steal your inner peace. COVID, vaccines, the war, the cost of everything going up, you name it. And when those things pass by, I'm sure there'll be a lot more to have fear and worry over, because after all, we're human. But the more we worry about things and let fear into our lives, the more it impacts our health, our relationships, and even how well we perform at our day job. Our life can feel like it's one thing after another, and finding inner peace or even joy in our lives can feel like a truly uphill battle to maintain. So how do we do it? And is it even possible in today's world? We're going to be answering all those questions, but before we go any further, let me introduce my guest. Bohdi Sanders is a multi-award-winning and a best-selling author of 16 books. He is an inner peace life coach, 5th degree black belt in Shotokan Karate, a martial arts Hall of Fame inductee, a columnist for World Martial Arts Magazine, TaeKwonDo Times Magazine, and the Healing Path Magazine, and an internationally renowned philosopher on inner peace, the warrior lifestyle, and martial arts philosophy. He is a lifelong seeker of wisdom and has incorporated wisdom from throughout the ages and from around the world in his books and writings for over 15 years. His common sense philosophy and worldview has inspired and helped thousands of people worldwide. His 16th book, The Art of Inner Peace, was released at the end of 2021. It details the life lessons he has learned from overcoming many, and I mean many, challenges in his life. It is a step-by-step guide to developing and maintaining inner peace, tranquility, and a calm spirit, and has been called life-changing by many readers. And let me say, we can really use inner peace with all that's going on in today's world. So I'm happy and excited to have him. Welcome, Bohdi.
Thank you, Carol. I'm happy to be here.
Well, why don't we just jump right in?
Sounds good.
Now, I know you've released this new book, The Art of Inner Peace, but how did the idea for this book come along? I mean, it's different than all your other books from what I can tell.
Yeah, I had a rough patch where I went through about 4 or 5 years having one surgery after another, just back to back, where I didn't even have time to recover from one before I had the next. In the midst of all that, I ended up having to have an emergency brain surgery to remove a life-threatening brain tumor.
Wow.
And, while that was going on, I was rear-ended by a drunk driver. Had some issues going on with the family, deaths in the family. Was being attacked online nonstop. It just all got to be a lot. And I kind of took a couple of years off from writing. I normally, write constantly. And I took a couple of years off to step back and kind of decide what direction I wanted to go next. I was meditating and I said, I really got to get my life straightened out and back on track. And it just hit me. Yeah, I need to get my inner peace back. And so I started working on that. And the more I did, the more I said, this is something that everyone needs. This is going to be my next book. And so I started writing it. It was probably the hardest book I've ever written because I was writing it at the same time I was integrating all these things into my life. And it started working and changing my life. And the more it did, this book is going to help a lot of people. And so in a lot of ways, it's already helped a lot of people. And I've been getting swamped with emails and letters about how great the book is. So I think I was led to write this.
Definitely. I can definitely see that's the case. And I know it's kind of like going down a rabbit hole because there's so many things that once you start writing, when I was reading, I was going, oh yeah, this leads to this, which leads to that, which leads to this.
Exactly.
So I can see where it could have been even a whole lot longer than it is. You managed to compact a lot of information into one book that wasn't even 500 pages.
It could be. It's once you get rolling, it starts coming through. You really have to kind of slow it down in order to put it all into a book that is not going to be like an encyclopedia.
Or kind of like steamroller over people because there's just so much information.
Right, right.
Yeah, I found that when I was reading it, I really had to take a little more time for each sentence almost because I wanted to get it in as much as I could without having to reread it 5 times, which
Right.
sometimes I almost did. Certain sections I went back and I'd read again because I went, did I really get that? And knowing that it's one of those books I could go back and reread a number of times and still not get everything all the way in my head.
Yeah, I've had so many people tell me that. Almost every day I'm getting emails and they'll say, I'm on my third round. I'm reading it for the third time or the fourth time. And, my wife is even, I think she's on her fourth time around reading it. She normally doesn't read a lot of my books. She's my editor as well, but she edits it and then she's done with it. But this one, she edited it and then she started reading it over and over again. That alone speaks highly of the book.
Well, and it probably feels really good for you personally, right?
Oh, yeah, it does. Well, it always feels good when you're helping somebody.
That's true. Talking about helping people, what problems are you trying to solve with this book? I mean, obviously about inner peace, but how specifically can it help people deal with all the stuff that's going on today?
Well, in the last 2 years, I've never seen so many people allowing fear and worry to control their lives. It just seems like people around the world, everyone is scared, of the virus, of this or that, or of taking the vaccine or not taking the vaccine. But this is the perfect time for this book because everyone needs this information. My hope is it just helps everyone improve their life. But, I have a good bit in here about getting over your fears, your worries, controlling your mind. And that is something everyone needs right now because it seems like fear has a grip on the vast majority of the population. That doesn't have to happen. It doesn't have to be that way. People don't have to live their life full of fear and worry because you can't live a life of inner peace and at the same time be controlled by fears and worry about, what's going to happen next.
It can really spiral.
Oh, absolutely. You've got to keep it under control or it will spiral. Because once you start allowing fear to control your decisions, your life, what you do, where you go, it just snowballs and it gets bigger and bigger. And that fear spreads. And it will not only spread in your life, but it's contagious. It'll spread to your family, to your friends, and it just continues to go.
Yeah, I've seen that with a lot of different people that I know that once they start sort of losing it with the fear, they just can't find their way back. They're just sort of there. They become recluses right now.
There was a study done back in the mid to late 70s by the KGB. At the time, it was still the Soviet Union. And they did a study. They were both the United States and the Soviet Union were doing studies on the mind, the subconscious mind, how to control stuff, if you could control things with your mind. And one of the studies the KGB did was they took a group of people and they fed them certain specific fears just to see, what would happen. And they did it for, I believe it was 6 to 8 weeks. And what they found was if you feed somebody a specific fear for that amount of time, whatever it was, 6 to 8 weeks, even if you come back and later show them, well, that was bad information, it wasn't true, here's the real facts, they could not actually, the people could not wrap their mind around the fact that what they had been afraid of for 2 months is not real. And even when they were presented with the facts, it wouldn't change their mind. They were stuck in that rut of the same fear that they had been fed, which is a very interesting fact. And it's a very scary fact too, because with some of what we have going on in the country, both with the virus and politically, you're getting misinformation from every side. And if you get fed that same information over and over and over again, according to this study, it's almost impossible for people to remove that and see the truth. And that's kind of a scary thought.
It definitely is. I hadn't heard that before, but it certainly makes a lot of sense with what's going on.
Oh, absolutely.
Let me get back to the book here specifically. I know you give us a step-by-step way to find inner peace, and it does sound like a lot of work. It sounds like it could be your day job almost. It's got so much work and your 24-hour job. So how can we stay focused on making those changes? Because there are so many other things that are priorities that keep pulling at us and getting us to do other things. I know that when I work with my clients, they're just, but I can't do what I told you I would do. I really needed to do something else. So the accountability factor is like, okay, but why was this important in the first place? How can you stay
Right.
centered in what you need? So, what do you say to people about this?
Well, yeah, that's the trick. It's staying motivated. And it's the same way no matter what your goal is. If your goal is to make a lot of money, you have to stay focused on that goal. If your goal is to live a life of inner peace and tranquility, you have to stay focused on that goal. And it has to become second nature to you. It seems like a lot of work at first, because at first is when you're breaking the old habits and you are reprogramming your subconscious mind. You are cleansing your subconscious mind of all the different information that you've programmed it with for, in my case, just about, I'll be 60 in December. So I've had 6 decades of programming in my subconscious mind. That's a lot, especially if you're programming thoughts and information that doesn't really serve you. And so when you look at people who live a life of inner peace, the people who are happy most of the time, who are not moved by fear and worry, their life is not a lot of work to them. It's their lifestyle. It's how they live. And the main thing you have to stay focused on is you have to integrate mindfulness into everything you do. And that doesn't mean you have to sit back and think, oh, should I say this? Should I not say this? You just have to be mindful of your thoughts and your words and your actions. And that means you just think about it. You don't have to sit and worry about it, and debate it back and forth, but you have to be mindful of what you say. You don't want to be saying negative stuff about yourself all the time, or you don't want to be saying, I'm afraid I'm going to get COVID, or I'm afraid my parents are going to get COVID and die. Okay, that is feeding your fears. And not only that, you are making negative affirmations, which you're programming those fears and those fearful thoughts into your subconscious mind, and you are adding to all the negative information that's already in your subconscious mind. Cleansing your subconscious mind has to be the first step. And that is where most of the work comes in. That's why it seems like so much work. It's important because science is telling us now that 95% of everything we do, our actions, our words, our thoughts, are coming from the subconscious mind. So we do this stuff. We think these thoughts, we say these words without even really consciously thinking about it, because it has become so ingrained in our subconscious mind that it's a habit.
I don't know if you checked me out, but before we got together to do the podcast, but on my YouTube channel, I have every Sunday night an I am affirmation, because I'm trying to get to that subconscious mind. Mm-hmm. So something that's really, really positive and personal, so people get in there and help dig it out, pull out the negative and reprogram that way. But there are so many different tools to do that. And that's why I appreciate your book too, because that's another way. And that's like the active way of, okay, you in there. We're shifting right this minute, rather than more of a gentle way. It's more of I'm going to take you out and shake you and change it, turn it upside down and really make all the negative stuff fall out so you can see them and shift them.
You didn't program your subconscious mind overnight. You didn't do it in a month or 2 months, and you're not going to change it all overnight. It's a process, but you can start immediately. You're not going to get results immediately. You may see some changes immediately, but to consistently change your life, it's going to take a commitment. And that's why it seems like work, because it takes a commitment to change your subconscious mind, not only to cleanse it of all the negative thoughts and the information that's not helpful to you anymore. You have to replace that with the thoughts and information that does help you to get to where you want to be and to live a life of inner peace.
I know that you have to really stay really focused too, like you said, but also as fully present as possible, because it's hard to hear yourself and what you're saying and what you're thinking and all those other things. And knowing whether you think you deserve it or you think you're worthy of having peace is another big thing we'll get into later.
Yeah.
Because I know that that can also be something that will help you stay focused and motivated.
Right.
Because if you don't think you are, then motivation will just go right out the window.
Yeah. If you don't think you deserve something, not only is your motivation going to go out the window, but your subconscious mind, it takes those thoughts, I'm not deserving, I don't deserve to live life inner peace, this and that. It takes what you tell it to be truth, and then it works to manifest whatever thoughts you're feeding it. And so if you're continually saying, I'm not deserving it, or thinking I don't deserve it, then that's what your subconscious mind is going to try to manifest in your life, that you don't deserve it and you're not going to have it.
And I know sometimes with these new habits we're trying to do, we can try and force ourselves to change them. And we don't always have a whole lot of success with that, because it seems like you do pretty good and all of a sudden you slide back and then you give yourself this negative, well, why did you do that? How come you didn't do it right? And then you give up a lot of times. Or with smoking, or the more addictive type habits, it's like you try and do it on your own. Sometimes you have success, sometimes you don't. And so how does the subconscious mind get us stuck? And how can we change that? Because it seems like it's so programmed, it's got so much information in there that we can't seem to release it. And I know, I've read the book, but I want you to give us a little more information on that, because I know the listeners will want to know.
Okay. Well, like I said, we spend decades programming our subconscious mind. And many of the habits that have been developed over the years have been ingrained in the subconscious mind. So you're not just breaking the physical habit of smoking, but you have the addiction, the physical addiction, but you have what's been embedded in the subconscious mind. Okay, you're used to putting the cigarette in your mouth or holding it in your hand. So it's more than just the smoking. It's the habits that you're used to that you have to change as well. Like I said, science is showing that around 95% of our words and actions are controlled by the subconscious mind. If you've been smoking for 20 or 30 years, not only are you used to doing that and you have the physical addiction, but you have the mental addiction to it too. You think, I need this, I have to have this. Well, if I don't have this, I get stressed out. It calms me down. Or if I quit, I'm going to gain weight. I'm going to be fat. You have all these other thoughts that are embedded on top of the actual habit of smoking. In order to have lasting success at changing old habits, you have to start, like I said, cleansing and reprogramming the subconscious mind. And you have to make a firm decision. It takes quite a bit of self-control and self-discipline to do that, because your subconscious mind is going to fight against you until you do get those thoughts out of there. And I like to look at the subconscious mind kind of like a computer. When you're born, you don't have any programming in that computer. But as soon as you're born, other people are starting to program that computer for you. Then the older you get, you're programming that computer as well. You're getting viruses in that computer, which are negative thoughts that are not real, that you believe, but they're not actually truth, and they're not helping you with your goals. And you have to remove those viruses from your computer, from your mind. Until you do, they're going to continue to disrupt the way your computer works, the way your mind works. And it will continue to be working against your efforts and trying to bring you back to what your subconscious mind considers to be normal and considers to be what you truly want, because it's been fed that information and programmed with that information for decades. And so that's where the work comes in.
I'm really on board with finding those limiting beliefs, because I've worked with that a lot and helping people discover what they are.
Mm-hmm.
How do you do that? Because some of those are really elusive. The trick is figuring out what they are, because sometimes they're kind of underneath other things. Is there any way that, and I'm kind of throwing a hook at you or a left curve at you here, but is there any way that you have specifically looked at or found that works better to discover some of those that are maybe not as obvious? Because those are the ones that are really rooted in there, it seems like.
Right. To me, the best way to do that is through meditation. I am a big proponent of meditation. It helps in so many different ways. If you meditate on that and you meditate, you get quiet, those things will come to you. You'll be shown, well, you need to get rid of this, or this is holding you back, or that is where your main problem is. You need to do something about that. And they come from your spirit. I don't even think that thought anymore. That has nothing to do with it because I don't believe that. Well, it doesn't matter if you don't believe it right now. If you have programmed it into your subconscious mind for 20 years, you may have changed your belief, what you think, but you never got that old belief out of your subconscious mind. I also think counseling can help with that. If you talk with somebody else, they can kind of bring up things that you may not see, you may not have thought of, and then automatically you think, okay, I see, I have to take care of this. I didn't even realize that before.
I kind of think of it as having pulled the weed already, but you left the root behind.
Exactly. And if you do that, you're not, if you break a weed off level with the dirt, it's going to continue to come back over and over. And I use, a lot of gardening examples in the book because, I have a Japanese garden and I have a vegetable garden and I do a lot of gardening. It doesn't matter how many times you cut that weed down. If you don't get the roots out, which with this example, the roots are in your subconscious mind. If you don't dig those roots up and get that weed out by the roots, it's going to continue to grow. You may not notice it because you don't see it growing each day, but you'll go back a week later, 2 weeks later, and there the weed is again. And you have to cut it back down. 2 weeks later, there it is again, because you're not getting to the root of the problem. That's a perfect example. You have to dig it up by the roots, and then, you're not going to deal with it anymore.
I agree. I wanted to talk about our emotions because I know that they can really get us off track. And for me, I always refer to it as lowering my vibration, meaning that I'm not in the happy place, or however you want to look at it. Mm-hmm. So sometimes we get kind of on a merry-go-round. We react with anger or doubt or fear, and it's just ingrained. Is that something specifically just looking at emotions? Can we get rid of those completely? But we are humans, so I know there's going to be some issues of them coming back up. But the initial response, kind of the ingrained response?
Like you said, you're never going to get rid of your emotions. That's part of being human. But it goes back to the subconscious mind again. And I know I'm saying that a lot, but it does go back to the subconscious mind. Those automatic reactions such as anger, fear, doubt, getting upset, those are embedded in the subconscious mind. That's why you keep having the same reaction to the same stimulus over and over. For example, say if you're driving down the highway and some guy cuts you off, flips you off, and you don't think about it. If you've been reacting the same way for years and you automatically start cursing and flip the guy off right back and get all upset about it, you've done that hundreds of times. You don't think about it anymore. Somebody cuts you off, it's an automatic reaction. Boom, you flip him off, you start cussing, you get worked up, you lose your inner peace. And you didn't even think about any of it. It just happened. It was normal for you.
Instantaneous.
Yeah, absolutely. And in order to do that, you have to slow down and be mindful to not allow that anger to just pop up like that or that fear. I helped one lady who really had a fear of snakes. We have little garter snakes in our garden. Of course, they couldn't hurt you if they wanted to. But even seeing one, she screams, runs, she totally freaks out. And I'm thinking, okay. And I told her, I said, you realize this snake can't hurt you, right? I picked it up and I said, come over here. I want you to touch. Oh, no. I said, I'm not going to let it move. Just touch his back. And she touched me. Wow, it feels different. I've never felt anything like that before. And I said, look at his head. See how small it is. It couldn't even bite you on the pinky finger if it wanted to because it's not big enough. I said, it can't hurt you. You're afraid of this snake because you have programmed yourself to be afraid of snakes. I said, but you're not being mindful and rational. If you thought about it rationally, you wouldn't be afraid of the snake because there's no way it could hurt you. And a lot of the fear and the anger and the worry, it comes because we're not thinking rationally. We are just on autopilot. We have responded the same way or reacted the same way, and we continue to do it for years and years every time. Reactive anger is nothing more than a habit that's been embedded into our subconscious mind. Just like I talked about cutting somebody off in traffic or they cut you off, or if somebody came up and insulted you, you have a certain way that you've reacted to that in the past, and your subconscious mind knows that, and automatically you react the same way. And it becomes a habit. And so the emotions, even though you're never going to get rid of them, if you start being mindful of your actions before you react, and you give yourself just a few seconds to think before you react, then you can control those emotions and you can change the way you respond to whatever you're responding to.
And I know you talk about the power of choice and how when you're talking about responding or reacting. Mm-hmm. And I remember I learned this really early on because I went to a Unity church, and the minister would always say at the beginning, "How are you doing today?" And everybody go, "Great, wonderful," or "Sucky," or whatever they answered. And she said, "Your choice. It's your choice how you respond." So that was like 12. So I got ingrained in that. So when you said that, I went, oh yeah, I remember that. This is always what I've said in my podcast and my YouTube channel. It's your choice. And people don't necessarily believe that. So can you tell us your take on what you mean by that? Even me a little more depth?
Well, when you react, you are doing it automatically. You're not taking time to think. You're just reacting. Say a small bug is buzzing around and it flies towards your eye. Your eye blinks automatically. You don't think about it. You don't stop and think, oh, I got to blink before this bug gets in my eye. It just happens. And that is what happens when you react to something. You do it without thinking about it. You just act. When you respond, you actually have to stop and consider, how you're going to respond, and then you do it. And so you take a few seconds or a few minutes, depending on what it is. You decide, okay, I'm not going to respond in anger. I'm not going to let this guy get to me. And you respond a different way, in a way maybe that de-escalates that whole situation. But if you react, you're not thinking about it. And so, somebody comes up and they say something rude to you. And if you let your subconscious mind be in control, then you're going to react to that the same way you always react when somebody comes up and is rude to you. You're going to come back with a rude comment or a sarcastic comment. Then he's going to get upset, and it's just going to escalate from there. If you respond, you stop, you think about what you want to do, you think about how you want to handle the situation, and then you respond in that way, in a way that changes the situation into something that you would rather have it be instead of what it's going to automatically be if you respond in the same way.
I know that is a big lesson the first time you try it, because you can make people not expect your response. And all of a sudden you'll say something totally different than maybe you normally would, and people's mouths hang open and they don't quite know how to react to you. So it's kind of fun, actually.
It not only changes the whole situation, but it confuses their mind. And so if they're being rude on purpose, or they're ready to come back with another angry reaction or response to you, all of a sudden you have confused them and they just lose their train of thought. They can't come back with the same response they were ready to give you. It changes the whole situation and the whole atmosphere. When you do that, you can turn a bad situation or something that would evolve into a bad situation into a situation that ends up being nothing. And it doesn't disrupt your inner peace. It doesn't spoil your day. It changes the whole atmosphere.
It just reminded me about something when I was maybe 24, 25, and I was at work. I worked as a legal secretary, and somebody came at me because we were sharing space, and she answered my phone when I wasn't at my desk. And I never answered her phone when she wasn't at her desk because that wasn't the arrangement with the... At one point, she came up to me and she was really angry, and she went off on me saying, well, you don't answer my phone. It's not fair, blah, blah, blah. And I thought, she's right. And so instead of reacting, I just looked at her and I said, you're right. And she went, what? She stopped everything. And I went, you're right. I said, just let me know, because I can't see over the filing cabinets. Let me know when you do that, because I can't actually see you. And she went, oh, well, okay. Yeah. And it totally shifted the dynamic. And after that, she was even nicer to me because she knew I was reasonable and that I was okay. And I hadn't even thought about that it wasn't fair. And that kind of showed me that response, if you really consider your response, it can really shift things. I hadn't thought about that for years. Thank you. That was kind of a fun memory.
It works pretty much every time. Even if you have a guy, and I've taught martial arts. I've been a martial artist for, I guess, 36 years now. Wow, I'm getting old.
But you started when you were 2, so it's okay, right?
We talk about this in martial arts classes, when I was teaching, and I would teach my students, that's okay, if somebody comes up and tries to sort of start a fight with you, and you react not by puffing up, getting back in their face, and I'm not going to put up with this and that. But if you decide to say, oh, you're right, I'm sorry, man, I didn't mean to offend you. It does the same thing. They were ready for an argument, get loud and rude and obnoxious, and possibly even come to blows. And you just took everything they were ready to say or do away from them. And now they're like, well, okay, they don't know what to say. They say, well, that's okay. And they walk away.
I love when that happens. I was wanting to ask you about one of the tools that you give us in the book, so I hope you don't mind giving it away. You called it scratching the DVD idea. I said, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I actually learned that technique when I was studying Reiki about 25 years ago. Back then, when I was taught the technique, it was scratching the record. But I didn't want to sound too old, so I updated it to scratching the DVD. It's basically a powerful form of visualization. Basically, it's going to sound silly to a lot of people, but it actually works. Say you have a negative situation. Say I've used this on a lady who was very abused as a teenager by her dad. She had been to counselors, to all kind of people trying to get over this. And I said, I think I can help you. And I had her do this. And, sometimes you have to do it most of the time, you have to do it more than once. But I said, okay, here's what you're going to do. And so you sit down and you replay the whole negative situation in your mind, which is probably the opposite of what, most counselors would advise people to do. They want to get that out of their mind, not replay it. But you replay it with the same emotions, the feeling, just like you're seeing it on a movie. You got to feel those emotions, those negative emotions that came from it, the hurt, the shock, everything. When I was doing this, she was shaking, physically shaking, crying. And I said, okay, now you got that in your mind. Okay, now you stop. Okay, that is your movie. Now what we're going to do, we're going to go back. And I want you to replay that movie in your mind again. But this time, before you do it, I want you, that's a movie on a DVD, I want you to take a nail and I want you to scratch that DVD. I mean, tear it up, put the biggest scratches, the deepest scratches you can put in it, scratch it in all different directions, pound on it with a nail, make it so that DVD won't ever play again. So she does this mentally. You say, okay, you think I could put that DVD in my DVD player and play it? She said, well, no, I just ruined it. I scratched it. I banged on it. I messed it up. It won't play. Okay. I said, okay, so let's make a new movie. So I want you to go back to that same time that this abuse happened. And I want you to now make the movie the way you would like to see it. And you can do this in a couple of different ways. You can make it funny. You make it like a comedy and where it makes you laugh when you watch the movie, or you can just completely change the whole situation, the whole sequence of events. It's up to you. And so she did it, and she went back and changed it and got rid of what had happened and changed the entire movie. And I said, now I want you to replay that DVD in your mind. And when she did, she was actually smiling, laughing about the whole thing. And we had to do this 2 or 3 times, but eventually that whole situation, even though she still remembered what happened, it didn't have the same effect on her anymore that it was having. And it was having a major effect on her life. I mean, there were things that strangers couldn't touch her without her just breaking down and having a panic attack. She completely got past that.
Wow. People
think about visualization. They think, oh yeah, you just imagine it in your mind. But it's very powerful, and it's been proven scientifically to be powerful. They did an experiment several years back on visualization with basketball players. And they divided them into 3 groups. One group that didn't practice at all, didn't do anything. One group who practiced, shooting free throws just like they normally would on the court. and one group who didn't do anything but visualize shooting free throws. And what they found is the group that didn't do anything, their percentage of free throws went down. The group that were on the basketball court shooting free throws, they increased about 25%. But here comes the interesting part. The group who only practiced through visualization, they increased their skills 24%. They were only 1% different than the players who were out on the court practicing with the ball. And that's the power of visualization. And that's why I say that, you should use visualization to, help cleanse your subconscious mind, to get over, certain, negative events in your life. And it does work.
I really love the fact that you mentioned something that a lot of people don't, is when you release something and you let it go out of your subconscious mind, that you have to fill the void. Because I talk about this quite a bit. If you don't fill it with something, just any old thing will rush right in. And usually it's something negative, it seems like. And so I really commend you for including that part of it, because I know many people don't.
Well, thank you. The universe, I forget who said this. I can't think of the guy's name right now. He was a scientist. And he said, and the quote is, the universe abhors a void. So anytime you have a void, or you remove one thing from your life, something is going to come in to fill that. If you quit smoking, and this is why so many people think if you quit smoking, I'm going to get fat. Well, because so many people have quit smoking, and instead of smoking, they're constantly eating. And of course, you're going to gain weight if you change from smoking to nibbling on something all the time. But you don't have to. You can replace that with something else. Another lady I'm trying to help quit smoking, and I'm telling her that. And the reason she's having such a hard time stopping smoking is because it's ingrained in her subconscious mind that if I quit smoking, I'm going to be fat. And until she gets rid of that thought, she's not going to quit smoking, because her subconscious mind tells her, you don't really want to quit smoking because you don't want to be fat. And if you quit smoking, you're going to be fat.
And the conscious mind is on board with that, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so she say, well, yeah, I don't really want to quit. And I said, well, you're not going to quit until you change that. Because if you don't want to quit something, you're not going to quit it. Even if you know it's bad for you, you should, it doesn't matter. If you don't want to do it, you're not motivated to do it. And until you get your mind right, you're not going to get your actions right.
Well, and speaking about talking to yourself in a certain way, and meaning the power of words and even thoughts is incredible. I was wondering if you wanted to speak a little bit about the power and meaning of your words, because I know that you talk about in the book how you talk to yourself, how you think about yourself, and even what you say out loud that's negative. General thoughts, talking to yourself, talking about others, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Everything in your life begins with your thoughts. Every word you speak, it first begins as a thought in your mind, then you say it. Even if it happens basically automatically, it started with a thought, and now that thought is in your subconscious mind, and you don't have to think about it anymore. You just say what you're going to say. Anything you've ever done, anything you've ever said, it starts with your thoughts, and your thoughts are very powerful. Basically, your thoughts are the source of everything in your life. And some people kind of get upset when I talk about this, that, you are responsible for everything in your life. And they say, well, I wasn't responsible for that car wreck. Well, you may not have been the one at fault, but you were responsible for being where you were at the time. In a certain way, you were responsible, not because the guy hit you. I was rear-ended sitting at a stoplight, waiting for the light to change, and the drunk driver rear-ended me going 35 miles an hour.
Ouch.
And I'm thinking, okay, that wasn't my fault. I'm not responsible. But if I would have left home 10 minutes earlier or 10 minutes later, I wouldn't have been at that specific place at that time. And so in a way, I did put myself in that position, which is hard for some people to comprehend. But it's important that you think that way, because if you don't, you're making yourself a victim. It's more powerful to be in control of your life than to be out of control and to consider yourself a victim. Okay. If you're in control, you can change something. If you're a victim, you have no power over what's going on. Your words basically reinforce your thoughts and actually have the power of creation. And I don't mean that, you're going to get whatever you say. I call it a blab it and grab it, mentality. It's not an automatic thing. You're not going to just manifest everything that comes out of your mouth. And it's a good thing for us because a lot of what comes out of our mouths is not stuff we would want to manifest in our life. When you entertain a certain thought and you entertain it over and over again, and you reinforce that thought with corresponding words and emotion, and you repeat those words or that affirmation over and over, and you do it with feeling and thought and emotion, you are essentially programming your subconscious mind. And then your subconscious mind starts working to manifest those things in your life. So your words do have power. That doesn't mean they're magic. They're not magical. You're not going to be like Samantha Stevens on Bewitched and say something and wiggle your nose and it appears in front of you.
You may just have also aged yourself for that one.
No, I thought about that when I was saying it. I realized it as soon as it came out of my mouth. But your words do have power. It's not just every word you speak, but the words that you feel with emotion and feeling and desire. You are programming your subconscious mind when you do that. And when you do that, your subconscious mind starts to work to make those things manifest in your life. And that is what I mean when I say your words have power.
And I know that a lot of times people don't think about their thoughts because they're not paying attention to their thoughts. They're just floating along, letting things go, or even they don't hear themselves say the negative things about themselves.
Yeah, and that's where mindfulness comes in.
Yeah.
You have to be mindful. Several people who have read the book said, oh, well, that's too much work, to think about everything you say and do. Actually, you're thinking about what you say and do anyway, but you've thought about it so much that you programmed your subconscious mind. It's automatic for you. So after you thought about it so much, you don't have to continue to think about it each time, just like driving your car. When you first start driving your car, you have to think, okay, I'm coming to a stoplight. I have to slow down. I'm going to turn right. I have to put my blinker on to look both directions. And you're thinking about all this stuff. But after you've been driving for 20 years, you don't consciously think about all that. You come to the stoplight, you stop, you put your blinker on. If you're turning, you may be thinking about something completely different. It's automatic because it's ingrained into your subconscious mind, and you don't have to think about it anymore. You just do it. You just act. And that works positively with things like driving your car, but it also works in the other direction with the negative things you fed your subconscious mind over and over again. Those things which are causing more negative aspects to come out in your life, those are what you have to remove because you don't want to continue to react in negative ways that are not fostering inner peace in your life.
We had such a great time with this interview that it went on for quite a bit more time. So this is going to be the first half of the interview. Please listen again next week for part 2. In the meantime, if you'd like to contact either Bohdi or myself, you can look at the episode description to find all of our social media handles, our websites, and our emails. And if you'd like to know more about life coaching with me or with Bohdi, intuitive readings with me, or marconics multidimensional energy, either to receive the energy or to become a practitioner, please reach out to me either by email or through my website. Thank you all so much for joining me here today. And I want to thank especially my guest, Bohdi Sanders, for discussing inner peace, and I really look forward to having you here part 2 next week. Until next week, be courageous and reach higher. And remember, transformation is a journey and not an end destination, so be kind to yourself. Just take one step at a time, get the help you need, and get out there and find your joy and your inner peace. Make you a priority because you deserve it.
Thank you for listening to Connect to Joy. If you love the show, make sure you rate, review, and share this podcast. And subscribe so you never miss an episode. Contact the host, DeChaine, with questions and comments, ideas for future episodes, or if you would like to become a guest. And remember, transformation is a journey, and not an end destination. So be kind to yourself, because you are already enough to have the joyful, limitless life that you desire.